I think after talking to a few of them, I realized this is something I want to do. It keeps me close to the technical world, but it also gives me a good higher level picture of how we are all connected and how we are delivering the best to our customers.
That is Neha Ahlawat, Product Manager for Custom Metadata here at Salesforce. I'm Josh Birk, Developer Evangelist for Salesforce, and here on the Salesforce Developer Podcast, you'll hear stories and insights from developers for developers. Today, we sit down and talk with Neha, who, by the way, is a former Tesla intern who learned about Salesforce when she went to a career fair and ended up becoming an engineer here. But now she is a product manager, and we are going to sit down and talk about custom metadata, what it is, the fancy new CLI plugin for it, and the roadmap. And to begin with, I asked her the same thing I ask a lot of product managers. What is it like being a PM at Salesforce?
Lots of meetings. Definitely lots of meetings. The day, or let's say the week, is spread out interacting with a lot of different people, different personas. I interact with the team regularly to see what they're doing, and developing aligns with what we want, what we want to be out there for customers. Definitely a lot of interaction with customers, partners, MVPs who bring back feedback, who ask questions, who have issues that they're facing, and bring them to our notice via these meetings or investigations.
Got it.
Talking to doc writers, which is a very, very important part because a solution cannot reach customers if it's not documented.
Right.
Meeting other PMs. Just to see how our product is fitting with overall where the company is headed.
Okay, so give me the elevator pitch for custom metadata.
Let's say you are working on building a form for your customers where you have a lot of questions, but those questions vary based on, what locality the customers are in, what's the housing, what's the geolocation, what's their age group, or maybe income, or a lot of different criteria could change how the questions appear in the form.
Gotcha.
So now you make all of those mappings in your org, in your dev org, and then you send out those forms into different customer orgs. Now, once those, you packaged and you sent out the form. Now, once the forms reach the customers, do you go back and set all of those mappings manually again? You don't want to do that, right? You want those mappings to stay intact. You want to send the forms over, and you want customers to start using them without having to send somebody into those orgs and reset all of those mappings. So that's where custom metadata types come in. They are similar to Salesforce metadata. It is a custom metadata that customers build, and its records being metadata, no surprise there. You can easily package them and move it between environments, send it across orgs, migrate it.
Gotcha.
So that's the advantage you get on using custom metadata types over S-objects. They are a great way of storing your application configurations, mappings, business rules, validations, and keeping them intact and moving it across orgs.
And comparing them to S objects, what is the shape of a custom metadata?
So a custom metadata, its records are metadata versus for a custom object, its records are data. So when you move, let's say, a custom object between orgs, only the shape of it moves. The records not move along with it. For a custom metadata, it's no surprise. Its records move along with the metadata. So
got it.
Yeah, you can do everything that you can do with a metadata API, deploy, retrieve through all the various channels. That basically anything you can do from all the various channels to a metadata type can be done to a custom metadata type.
Got it. And then going the other direction, how would you compare them to custom settings?
Well, custom settings, again, are like custom objects, right? They are not packageable. They are not, you cannot migrate its records between orgs and environments, versus you can do that for custom metadata types. We've talked about that a bit already, but some of the other things are caching. You can do that for custom metadata types to get unlimited calls and queries with custom metadata types.
Nice.
You can add record level protection on custom metadata types, which is much more sophisticated protection enhancement compared to custom settings.
Gotcha.
One other big one is relationships. With custom metadata types, you can define relationships to other custom objects, custom metadata types, or entity particles, even to even to the particles of compound fields, which you cannot do with custom settings.
Got it.
Yeah, and you can't reference custom settings in validation rules or formulas. So I think there's a lot more there for custom metadata types to offer.
Nice. And what are some locations that custom metadata can be used right now?
Basically, to store your application configurations, your mappings, you have customizable business rules, secrets, you could use it there. Yeah, if there's like a master detail relationship between your data, you can, between application configurations, you can use it.
Now, this is kind of a silly question. I mean, it's semi-obvious, but how is custom metadata better than just hard coding values? But like more specifically, like what are some pitfalls that you've seen people fall into when they're using hard coded values that custom metadata can help them out of?
Well, I mean, going back to my forms example, right? If you hard code those values there, you lose those mappings when you move it to a different org. Let's say the objects are not named similarly in the other org, right? Or let's say those values, those conditions change. So in some area, you want to show the same question for the age 24 to 30, but in some other area, you want to show it for age 30 to 35. So
gotcha.
Going in and changing those numbers in the code are never a good idea. So if you have actually relationships defined, all you can do is go change those endpoints which are storing those conditions, and it gets reflected everywhere in your rest of the flow, right?
I think the phrase "it's never a good idea to have to go change that in code" is like should be a placard on every developer's desk.
Right. It complicates your testing. It complicates like minor changes start
huge
looking
problems.
Major if you're hard coding stuff. It's never good.
Yeah. And then I think kind of to follow up on that, what are some ways that custom metadata can be used to like gate a process or like a decision in a flow or something like that?
Well, you can reference them in formulas, right? So you can always have validation rules in your process builder where you can set certain validations, or like you mentioned, those validations might work as gates. And I think that's a good way to use custom metadata types for those validations. So anywhere, if you have defined a relationship and then you have referenced that custom metadata in one of the validation rules in some flow, it will get executed and it will help gate whatever you're trying to gate.
Right. And then you can kind of turn things on and off without having to like blow up your entire application.
Right. Yeah.
How would VLOOKUP work with custom metadata, and is that feature out yet?
That feature is not out yet.
Okay.
It has been on our roadmap. To be very honest, it's not entirely unknown. We have some groundwork we have done for it, but there are some other exciting things that we are working on. Some of them I can talk about, some of them I cannot yet.
Sure.
But once those are out there for you, VLOOKUP is something that is on our long range roadmap.
Nice. And I do want to talk more roadmappy stuff, but one of the big things I really want to give a shout out to is the new CLI plugin for custom metadata. Like, what are some of the features that rolls out for developers?
Yes, it is definitely an exciting new feature. So for developers, basically, there are 5 new commands that you can start using to now create and manipulate custom metadata from the command line and not just from the setup UI. The 2 of my favorite ones from the set of 5 I'm more partial to are generate and insert. Generate basically lets you switch to custom metadata types, basically. So if you have existing custom objects or custom settings, it's going to take its shape, use it as a template, and just convert it into a brand new custom metadata type for you.
Nice.
And not just that, it'll also move its record, like the records that are stored in those custom objects or custom settings, over to the new custom metadata type. So I think that one is really powerful. And the other one is insert. It lets you bulk insert records from a CSV. And I think that one is a huge win, because until now, customers had been using the data loader, which is not something we support and maintain.
Right.
And we faced a lot of, there were investigations, there were cases when it was not functioning properly, and we couldn't do much about it. So now we actually have a plugin that we can maintain.
Nice. And I think that was a question off Twitter from the great James Lowry himself. And there's data loader, and then there was another side project that I think somebody had put up on GitHub, but now you can just load the data right in from the CLI itself. Yeah. And since this is all, based off the CLI, like you're saying, you can build all of this into like your continuous integration or your build scripts if you need to build out those custom metadatas into your Scratch org or anything like that.
Right. Definitely. I mean, that's the whole point of SFDX CLI, to give you that whole integrated end-to-end development experience, complete with integration, testing, automation. And with our plugin, it's a huge win for the devs to actually start using custom metadata types in the rest of the existing CLI experience that they already had.
Nice. And you were mentioning generating custom metadata from custom objects, but does Generate have the ability to generate things like off of existing custom settings or anything like that?
Yes, definitely. So if you already have settings in your org, custom settings in your org, you can just run the command to convert them right into custom metadata types and move all of its records. Awesome. And then just change your packages to include those custom metadata types instead.
Nice. Okay, so talking about the roadmap, a lot of questions I got from Twitter. This is kind of like the elephant in the room, I feel like, for custom metadata roadmap. I think you know what I'm going to say. You can see the corner coming around. Is hierarchical custom metadata. Where does that exist on the roadmap right now?
Yeah. So it it is the elephant in the room. It is not on our short-term roadmap right now. And that's only because it's not something easy to switch and to provide like something similar in custom metadata types for our customers. Having said that, we know how important hierarchical settings is, how much it is being used. And I do want to point out that a similar solution in custom metadata types is not going to be trivial. It needs a lot of research into it, which is why it is not on the short-term roadmap. So we are working on some, as I mentioned, we are working on some of the other things right now, some things you will get to know in the future releases. We're trying to get parity with list custom settings. That's another focus that we have in the current release and in our short-term roadmap. And once we deliver that, hierarchical settings is definitely the next thing that we want to work on. But gotcha. Right now, we don't have a solution for it, so I can't really promise anything.
I mean, we can go back to what seems to be the favorite phrase I keep hearing from the product teams, which is, part of your job is to build things quickly and not break anything, right?
Definitely.
So you've got the eyes on the prize, but it's no trivial task that's going to happen overnight.
Yeah. I completely understand that this one is going to be a big win for the customers, but in order to deliver something quickly, we don't want to break your existing processes, and we want to deliver a well thought solution rather than a hasty one release.
Totally.
For that. Yeah.
So I also got other questions about integrating custom metadata directly in with Apex. Like, are there any updates on the roadmap when it comes to working with custom metadata through Apex?
Yes. If some of the people who are listening to this have been on the release readiness live call, they might know that already. We actually have synchronous CRUD for custom metadata types from Apex on our roadmap. We are working on a solution for you there to make it like much better than how it is today. that's all I can say. It is on the roadmap. Yes.
Okay. And then the other question I got from Jody Miner was, is she can do custom metadata in formulas with Process Builder, with custom settings, but it sounded like not being able to do the formulas in Flow. Is that on your map?
So the short answer is no, we don't have it on the roadmap as of now. Having said that, it's not impossible to use custom metadata type with flows. Like you can always query custom metadata with get record elements in Flow. I understand it's not as direct as it is in Process Builder, and it would be a nice add-on to have. And it's definitely in our long range plan, not on the short-term roadmap.
Gotcha.
Again, other stuff is higher priority. But I do feel that this somehow actually plays out in the favor of flows, because it makes accessing and using a custom metadata in a flow more dynamic, right? So you can probably do much more with custom metadata type and flow than you can with Process Builder because of this not so direct relationship.
Right. Well, and this is also one of those examples of, because you would have to work with the Flow product team in order to get those updates in. So that I would also imagine that kind of complicates things.
Yes, definitely it does.
Okay, so you keep saying that there are things that are higher priority on the roadmap. I feel like there might be some things on the roadmap that you want to give a shout out to. Is there anything you can talk about?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we are working towards getting list custom settings parity with custom metadata types on parity with list custom settings. So we are working towards Apex static accessors, which means that you can now use some static references to get your custom metadata type record, similar to how you can in custom settings. So for the devs listening out here, basically the get values and get all methods that you have for custom settings, you will be able to do something similar for custom metadata types. You won't have to retrieve the records, loop over them, and add that performance
Gotcha.
Complication to looping over the record. So hopefully that will be a nice parity to have, plus it will be a good performance benefit, I would say. Or and the other thing, like I mentioned, we are working towards synchronous CRUD for CMT via Apex. We have asynchronous retrieve right now, and I know there are certain limitations to accessing custom metadata types via Apex as of today, which is why we are working towards making it synchronous, better, and provide more functionality than we do today.
Got it. And actually want to pull back to the CLI plugin, because I want to make it clear that is currently available for developers, right?
Yes, it was released with CLI version 49, and it's available.
All right. And finally, is there anything else on your roadmap that you want to give a shout out to?
I do want to mention that I know CLI is getting everyone excited, but we did release geolocation field support for entity particle relationships. So
nice.
Geolocation is a compound field that was not supported in our entity particle relationship earlier. So you can do that now.
Now, that's our show. Now, before we go, I did ask Neha about her favorite non-technical hobby, and it turned out the first thing that came to mind was something she'd actually never talked about within Salesforce.
Well, I have not. It's interesting that I have not mentioned it before within Salesforce. And now that you asked me that question, that's the first thing that came to my mind. I like to write poetry.
Nice. Now, after some initial reluctance, Neha did actually agree to let us add that WordPress blog into the show notes, so you can check out her poetry there. I want to thank Neha for the great conversation and information. Of course, I want to thank you for listening. And if you want to learn more about this podcast, head on over to developer.salesforce.com/podcast, where you can hear old episodes, see the show notes, and have links to your favorite podcast service. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you next week.